My name is Bez, and thank you, Richard, for giving me a bit of space on your stream. Back in the day, I used to do a radio show, an internet radio show called Board Games with Bez. I had the privilege of chatting to such wonderful people as Jamie from Stonemeyer Games, Vince from Lucky Duck, and of course Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules. Now, this particular chat is with Paul, talking about why do a convention. We chatted about GridCon, which is Paul's own convention, and you can listen to why exactly Paul chose to do it. We talk a little bit about Bastion, which I love, Dragon Mates and a couple of complaints, UK Games Expo, Tabletop Gaming Live. We talk about Paul's personal circumstances, death and tragedy, mothers, and wives. Wife singular, sorry. Paul is not a bigamist. We talk about overwork and we get a bit personal. We have a little bit of an intro to Paul. We talk about teaching games, about a craft fair, about myself trying out new jobs at drafts. We talk about the streaming that Paul was just starting to do back in those days and the butter of the week, because why not? Sometimes it's not just about games. We talked about the BG DevCon that I started. We talk about Essen and we talk about differentiating conventions from other conventions. This is basically a show about why would you start a gaming convention and trying to explore that. Without further ado, let's start the show. Board. Games. It's Board Games with Bez and Paul Grogan. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
And today the main topic is why make a board game convention? And obviously this is something that you've done and had your second convention not too long ago.
Yes, although it was the first one, but it was the second one, but it was actually the third. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I think that's always the case, that when you make a thing, people never really see the first attempt. I mean, like, in a bind, yes, it was my first mass-produced game, but obviously I'd made many things before then.
Yeah.
And whilst, I think you started with CGE, rules editing, but like whichever one you actually did professionally first, I'm sure you did like a bit of stuff that no one got to see even before that.
Yeah, plenty. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I confused people with my first convention because it's just finished. GridCon 1 was not last weekend, but the weekend before at the time of recording. But then I actually ran a warm-up event in the summer, which was called Ting, which is This Is Not GridCon. But because it was on the GridCon website, people were calling that GridCon, even though it wasn't. That was GridCon 0.
Even though it specifically said,
this is not GridCon. And then I actually, was it March? It was either March or April. I ran a charity games day, but I did that through the GridCon brand. So people thought that was GridCon. So depending on who you speak to, there has been 1, 2 or 3 GridCons, but officially GridCon 1 was the one that happened 2 weeks ago. So, yes.
And, I mean, very quickly in like 10 seconds, which we can then delve into later in 20 minutes, but was it just for a laugh? Was it, why did you do it?
Why did I do it? Because actually it's been running for 20 years at my house, and it got to the point where there was more people that I wanted to invite than I had room for. So I decided to move it out of my house and to an actual event.
Sounds really interesting. So it's actually something I hadn't even considered. So it's not that you decided at one point to make a convention. It just kind of evolved out of a home gaming event.
Yeah, it was 2 things, because obviously moving out of a home gaming event to a convention was a big step, a bigger step than I thought of it would be. So there's 2 sides of it. Essentially, yeah, you could just say, oh, well, it just grew out of one thing and then moved to a different venue and got bigger. But that decision of doing that was actually a decision of, do I actually want to host my own convention? And probably would have been so let's say you're in the same situation as I am and you wanted to start hosting your convention, you'd have to go through exactly the same steps as I went through. The fact that I've been running an event at my house for 20 years every November made no difference whatsoever. I still had to treat everything like, it was from the start.
Yeah, because I guess you need to scale things up to make it actually viable to pay for the hotel and, all the space that you're using now
Yeah.
that you can't just use your own living room and kitchen for
Well,
free.
exactly. When it was run at my house, there were no ticketing system. There was no lanyards to print out. There was no game. Well, there was a games library. It was my games room, but there was none of that. The only people who were here are people who I knew about. The 1 to 200 little jobs that we had to do for GridCon 1, we didn't have to do when it was held at my house. So yeah, it was a very different thing.
For sure. And obviously there's a lot of different reasons that people might start a convention. I mean, I think that Mark Cook did it Aircon for a very similar points of view.
Yep.
Basically saying, hey, I want to play games with mates. And then had it at their house, and then had it at the church, and then had it at Harrogate's Convention Centre.
Yep, moved from 20 people to like a few thousand, whereas mine's gone from 20 people to 200. Mark's now got the second biggest convention in the UK, I think.
Obviously, your priorities are going to determine what kind of events you want to do.
Yes, absolutely.
Because Bastion, which is one of my favourite conventions, but it might not be anyone else's, because for me, this is the only convention I've been to where I've not been volunteering, I've not been trading, I've not been demoing stuff. I mean, I might, show a couple of my games, and actually I've been there twice, and both times it's just a bunch of people who rent out a youth hostel for an entire long weekend and play games with each other. So you literally get up in the morning, you go into a big, massive kitchen with everyone there together. And this is, yes, about playing games together, but it's also about friends becoming bigger friends, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
And about fostering that. So it's, a little bit more than... And so when I'm at a convention like that, because it's not just about playing the heaviest games, yes, I played Eclipse, and I've not played many games that last... at conventions that last many hours.
Yeah.
But part of it is, wanting the social experience.
Yeah.
And having, if I play a game that's going to last 5 hours, whilst I've got nothing against 18xx, I would probably be rather like, I'd probably tend towards a murder mystery.
Right.
In that setting than or Eclipse even, which is at least has some negotiation in it.
Right.
But anyway, and Tabletop Gaming Live, they do it clearly as a profit-making thing.
Yep.
And Modifius arguably do their convention, yes, to give back to the community, but I'm sure there's a little bit of self-promotion in there.
Well, Dragon Meat's an interesting one, because Dragon Meat has been running for years. Insert the number there, just edit it in, nobody will notice. But it's like 30, isn't it? Or something like that. Now, Modifius stepped in and took over the running of it. So it was already an existing convention.
Yes.
And Chris from Modifius has run events he's got experience at running events. So Modifius took that on. But it's interesting that you say that Modifius would have taken it on for potentially promotional reasons for Modifius themselves. I don't get that impression. I get the impression that they're running Dragon Meat as a standalone extra thing. Now, of course, Modifius have a big booth there, which presumably they don't pay for, in a good prime position. So it's a little bit like GridCon and Gaming Rules. I did not start GridCon in order to promote Gaming Rules in any way, shape or form, but it certainly can't hurt it.
Sure, and I guess that's kind of a secondary priority. Maybe it's not the priority, but it's an extra thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the same way that for Tabletop Gaming Live, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, we really enjoy doing this and we want to have fun, but it is run by the Warner's Media Group, and it is done with the expectations that in a couple of years' time, they are going to be making a profit, or they're just going to cancel it. That is the impression I get.
Yeah, and maybe they've done it so that more people subscribe to their magazine, so it's extra advertising for their magazine. I don't know. But you're right, different people start conventions for different reasons. And if we look at games, UK Games Expo, right? The UK's largest, biggest board game convention, and I say this being friends with Richard and Tony, it's fantastic, it's amazing, and everybody should go there.
Yes.
Richard and Tony and Pat and all of the other members of the admin team, because there's a lot of them now, they made no money from UK Games Expo for years. When it started off in the Clarendon Suites in Birmingham 14, 15 years ago when I was first there, for years and years and years, it made no money. I would be surprised now if it doesn't make money, but did they do it in order to make this into a money-making scheme? No, they did
Clearly
it because...
not. And at this point, it does pay a wage for Tony and Richard and a couple of other people, because it's such a behemoth.
It's a full-time job. Yeah.
And they need to go to Essen to solicit people to come along.
Yeah.
Because frankly, that's one place where Dragon Meat does fall down slightly. Not kind of going out and having the time and energy to solicit people.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I've been fairly... I know, Chris from Modifius and John Dodd, and I'm friends with them and people like this.
People.
But they need to put more effort into Dragon Meat. The fact that in June... No, I think it was May of this year, so May 2019, the Dragon Meat website still said, buy your tickets for Dragon Meat 2019. The website hadn't been updated in 5 months.
2018?
Sorry, 2018, yeah.
Yeah, so basically
it hadn't been updated.
January, February, March, April, 5 months out of date.
5 months out of date for a professional convention website. It should have just said, Dragon Meat 2018 is over, thank you to all attendees. But it didn't. It hadn't been updated for months. And that's one of those things where you think, even GridCon, the website has been updated to say, thank you very much for coming. It's all over now. Let's look forward to GridCon 2. And that's just a one person, and they can say, oh yeah, we're busy, we don't have time to do it. We're all busy. But the point is, if you're going to run a convention like that, then you need to be updating the website. Certainly if you are that kind of convention, where you have exhibitors and you're at a big place in London. Anyway, that's just my little mini rant.
Yeah, but we've introduced the topic, we'll get back to it in 10 minutes. But first, I've not really introduced who is Paul Grogan.
I don't know.
And so if you don't know Paul Grogan, I guess you're best off talking about yourself, but I will introduce you as someone who writes a bunch of rules. Well, you don't really write rules generally.
No,
I
don't.
Generally rewrite.
Well, I do everything.
Generally you rewrite. Correct?
Generally, I would say the most common is probably, rewriting. I will get sent something. I will then turn that something into a rule book. That something might be 1 out of 10 or it might be 9 out of 10. It all depends. If a rule book arrives with me and it's 9 out of 10, I'll essentially do proofreading work. But sometimes the rule book that I get sent is just, random words on a piece of paper, as I like to call it.
Like designer notes.
Yeah, sometimes it's 4 pages of bullet point notes that isn't actually even a rule book, which I then have to obviously learn how to play the game and then turn into a rule book. Yeah.
And you've been doing this full time for ages. Your best known clients include, I think, Portal and CG.
I wouldn't mention Portal. Portal used me for a bit. The rule books that they did while they used me got good reception. Portal no longer use me for rule books. They've gone down a different direction. CGE is an interesting one because without CGE, Czech Games Edition, I would not be where I am now. They helped me get started, and I did a lot of rulebook work for them even before Gaming Rules started, which is how I kind of got into it. Is I was doing this stuff on essentially a voluntary basis for companies which I enjoyed their games of. They weren't asking me to work for free. I had a full-time job, and I was offering to help them because I loved their games. And I did lots of rulebook work for CGE for years. And a lot of people think that I am the editor of most CGE rulebooks, and I used to be, but starting about 1.5 to 2 years ago, I'm a lot less involved with the CGE rulebooks now than I was before.
So, as a percentage, how many CGE rulebooks do you say you finish off?
Well,
is it 30% now?
No, I still see them, but I'm not as involved as I used to be. 6 or 7 years ago, their latest game that they had that was coming out, they say, right, the rulebook's ready, off we go. And I'd literally spend an entire weekend or a week, every night of the week, editing it, working on it and helping out and everything else. This is before Gaming Rules was a thing. Now, they came to me with the rulebook for Sanctum, for example, a couple of weeks before Essen, and it arrived at a weekend where I'd already got the entire weekend booked out for work. And I'm like, okay, well, I can dip in, I can have a quick look, but I'm actually working 12 12 to 15 hours a day this weekend anyway, with other clients, with other work that I've got planned. And the way that CGE would work with the rulebooks, because they have such a big, strong team who work on their rulebooks, who are only working for CGE, that it means they can say, oh, right, it's rulebook time, and they all go and do it. Whereas now they come to me and say, Paul, do you have time to help out? And I say, unfortunately not. You needed to let me know a few weeks ago. But the nature of the way that they work is not that I'm not saying they're disorganised, it's just you never know when the rulebooks are going to be ready. So therefore I can't book it into the calendar for a specific time because it might not be ready by then, and then, it messes up my schedule.
So it's a bunch of different factors with them now having a dedicated in-house team, which
they've had that for years. They've always had the dedicated in-house team.
Also, you getting a lot more work and you being just too busy.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously, you are well known for being super overworked, and it is a problem with you, I'm aware. We've talked about this. I don't know if you want to get into this. It feels like they're quite public.
It's not that it is a very private matter, and the reasons for it go quite deep and are very personal, and I probably should be talking to a psychologist about it, but I'm fairly open about it. And I've tried this year to cut down my workload with limited success, and I've actually been trying to cut it down in November and December with a little bit more success. And next year, I'm hoping to cut it down even more. So in a nutshell, without getting too deep, is obviously I left a fairly well-paid full-time job. I then started gaming rules. I ended up working at least twice as many hours per week as I did before for half of the money. It affected the way I looked at things, because I was like, okay, so I used to bring in this amount of money into our household, and this is how we worked. I've now made the decision to leave my job, and suddenly we are now a lot financially. We're not as financially. We're in a worse place financially because of a decision that I made. How do I do what I can to try and fix this situation? Oh, if I just work every single waking hour I can, that will earn more money, and therefore I'll. Right, it's a terrible idea, but that's what my brain did. And that was a hard thing to get out of, because I charge an hourly rate. The more hours I'm working, the more money I'm earning. So that was one reason. The other reason...
I mean, maybe it's time to move away from an hourly rate. I know.
No. People... I can't. That's a whole other topic for another time.
Okay, let's not go there.
No, let's not go there. The other reason, unfortunately, is quite a sad one, is that my mother passed away in August of 2018, I think it was. Yeah, I'm losing kind of track of the years at the moment. But when she got diagnosed with terminal cancer, which is coming up for 2 years ago now, the way that I reacted to that, as far as my mental health goes, is I just shut down and went into work mode. So if I wasn't working myself to the bone before, I did it even more, because I wasn't able to cope with it. So almost everything stopped. Private life, any form of something that I would do for fun just stopped. And by working all the time, I didn't have time to reflect on how upset I was and how bad I was. That's what I did. That's how I reacted to it. It's really bad. Don't ever do that. Go and talk to friends. Go and seek help and whatever. Don't do what I did, which was literally throw myself even more into the work.
Yeah, as a form of escapism.
And heck, it kind of worked, because six months after that, I still hadn't been through the grieving process. And I was like, okay, well, I've kind of just got on with my life. And that's how I coped with it. Now, that is now over a year ago, and it's still a little bit weird when I think about it, but I have now, moved on, and I'm trying to calm things down. So yeah, they're the two main reasons why I work so much. It has become a running joke. Oh yeah, Paul's the hardest working guy in the industry, but please don't ever copy it.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I mean, sometimes when people say, oh, X is the hardest working person in Y industry, there's a temptation to say, oh, I want that acclaimed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Like
no.
Sometimes when there's claims like, oh, X is the jolliest person. I mean, okay, that's a nice thing to go for, but at the same time, you want to be true to yourself. You don't want to just put on a mask. And whilst it's nice to be known for something, I mean, I guess I'm known for wearing red.
Yep.
You don't really want to change yourself too much, and you certainly don't want to go down the kind of path. And I appreciate you saying to everyone that this is not a thing to emulate, but
No,
rather
not
a
at all.
cautionary tale.
Yeah. And when people have said it, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I know the reason why I'm working that hard. And as you say, I don't want anybody to feel that A, they have to in order to get into this industry, or B, they want to be like me. Don't be like me, really. So don't do that.
Just really quickly, I'm going to say that sometimes for myself, there is always the temptation and the inclination to say, oh, I'm not, with my own self-publishing stuff, I'm not selling as much as I'd like. How can I do better? Similar to you, spend all the time that I can.
Yeah.
Or, I'm not feeling like I deserve to be in this industry. Okay, I've got to spend more time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously, these are really unhealthy thoughts. And yeah, it's good to kind of do what you are capable of. And I think that if I was to talk whether to myself or to someone else, it's like, okay, whatever you're able to do is frankly good enough. And there is the old adage of, I can't remember, it was an old philosopher said something about, if someone's progressing, no matter how slowly, never chastise them. That's
a good phrase.
So I've kind of been a bit upset, like, oh, I've not kind of grown my audience as much as I'd like, which I do need to. And I found myself in a situation where, I've almost sold out of something and I need to go back to Kickstarter to do a reprint.
Right.
Which clearly I didn't maybe plan stuff well enough, but also I've just not got into shops, and distribution is the key part of it.
Yeah.
But everyone needs to do what they're capable of, and yes, there's something you can do better or worse, but don't feel like you have to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's different choices for everyone, and I'm certainly not in a position to give advice.
Yeah, and the only advice I can give is don't do what I do. So there you go.
So you work hard, you write rules, you do demos for CG when they pay you,
I
do a
demos
bunch of
for
videos.
Yeah, I do demos for many people. For the last few years, actually, I've been demoing Vital Lacerda's games for Eagle Griffin Games. So I've been doing demos of things like On Mars, Lisboa, things like that. And I'm hoping to start doing demos of Kanban next year, the new version of Kanban, because I'm writing the rules for that at the moment.
And that, I guess, makes perfect sense. If you're writing the rules, you'll be well placed to know all the rules.
This is the thing.
Because you've got a good system of drip feeding into rules as you go along.
Yeah. I mean, the latest rules video that I did, I think it's the latest one, is the On Mars video, which is a super complicated game. And people have watched that video and said, this is other people's words, not me. Oh, the meowing, by the way, Loki's just come in. So if you can hear meowing on the microphone, that's Loki. He's coming for his
Everyone
for his 12.
Can enjoy hearing Loki.
Yeah, 1239 cuddles. That's what it is. So people have said to me, the On Mars video, they said, wow, you've made a super complicated game sound not relatively easy, but your video was well structured, it was in the right order, you explained everything clearly, concisely, and everything else. And I'm like, yeah, I was a developer on the game, I helped write the rule book, I've been doing demos of it at events for the last 12 months, I've taught it about 20 times, so I had a little bit of a heads up, I didn't just go into that video completely raw, being given the game and being given the rule book. I'd been living and breathing that game for 12 months. So as you say, I'd had a lot of experience in teaching the game in person. Also, I had a lot of experience with writing the rulebook and how to present things in the rulebook, that when it came to writing the video, it was just, and I'm going to use the word simple here, not as simple, but turning everything that I knew into a video film. Yeah, I already understood the game. I could have effectively written the script of that game without looking at the rulebook, because it was all in my head. And as I say, from demoing it to people constantly, that's how you get to know
how to teach it.
Which order I should teach things in.
Because, I've learned so much about my games from demoing at conventions.
Yeah.
Because, yes, I get to lots of volunteers, and Dragon Meets was actually the first time that I had enough people that I didn't have to demo anything really, if you know what I mean.
That's good. You can just stand back and run the booth.
Yeah, I had to kind of stand back and answer a couple of corner cases with some
Yep.
people. Oh, sorry, I forgot. What's the tiebreaker in this game? Can you remind
Yeah.
me? And then I had to remind them because
Yeah.
it doesn't come up in, if something comes up in 1 out of 10 games, I can forgive my demoers for not
Yes.
remembering it.
Yeah.
But more to the point, when I've demoed something for hundreds of times, or frankly even like 10 times, you learn that, okay, teaching this at this point, it's a bit too early.
Yep.
Or conversely, hey, I try to teach this thing later, but actually they need all this information up front.
Yeah. Exactly
And
right.
just kind of with Kitty Cataclysm, when I reprint it, I am going to redo all the rules just to have those playful puns in there.
Yep.
Because at the start I was like, yeah, am I just annoying people with all these puns? And then what I found is that people actually laugh at it almost without fail. I would say 90% of demos I've done, I have made someone laugh.
Yeah.
Which I'm really proud of. And so obviously I'm going to try and put some of that back into the rulebook.
Yeah.
And so you can feed that back in for a second edition.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
we've already rambled so much about writing rules and who Paul Grogan is.
We have.
But let's talk about the cool thing of the week. So let's talk about something cool that has happened in the past week for you.
Something cool that's happened in the last week. Well, it's got to be game related because
It doesn't have to be.
yeah, but no, my entire life is games. I dream about games. I wake up, I'm working on games, I'm writing rule books, I'm doing videos, and I'm playing games. I don't do anything else. It's quite sad, but playing games is pretty much my entire life. I don't have any real other hobbies outside of games. So I can't really think of much else. It's not that, I mean, we went to a craft fair in Bradninch on Sunday. That was it.
Did you say a craft fair?
It was a craft fair. Well, it was actually a Christmas fair, but it was more of a craft fair in Bradninch on Sunday. But I wouldn't have said that was a cool thing.
Presumably getting away from work.
Getting away from work, it was a deliberate attempt to get out, and Bradninch is 5 minutes drive away. And we've got a friend who actually makes her own jewellery, and she had a stall there. If it weren't for that, we probably wouldn't have bothered going along, but we went along, it got us out of the house. And in fact, we actually, one of the stalls there, one thing we've done this year is we've actually got a gardener in to help us with the garden, because Vicky's she doesn't get back till very late at night. And we basically worked out that whilst we're the kind of people that would love the time to maintain our garden, we just can't, and the garden's a complete mess. So we actually got a gardener to come round for a few hours every few weeks just to do a few bits. Anyway, she was there. So as well as gardening, she actually has her own stall, and she makes these little glass jewellery things, which we didn't know until we walked into this craft fair, and there she was with her own stall.
Blowing their own jewellery?
No. Just, I mean, obviously it was a Christmas fair, so the decorations she had were Christmassy themed decorations. But we bought a couple from her. That was quite nice to see. It was like I looked at her and she looked at me, and we were like, yeah. I was like, oh, hello. Because it's been a few months since she's been round, with the fact that it's been raining constantly for 3 months in Devon. Not really gardening weather.
That does sound really lovely.
Yeah, anyway, I was going to talk about Cloudspire, but I ended up talking about the Bradninch Craft Fair instead.
Well, there you go. Sometimes it's nice in this podcast, we like to get away from games for just a minute.
Just a minute, yes.
And what I'm going to talk about, although it's kind of cheating because it was at drafts where I started working, but then I quit after a week, but I'm working until the 22nd, just so that I don't leave them in the lurch, if you know what I mean.
Oh, you were actually working there as a games guru?
Yeah, I only started basically 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And after a week, I realised, you know what? I thought I had the time for this, but I don't.
Right.
So I quit, but I said that I would work until basically the end of the year, just so that they're not left in the lurch.
Yeah, and they can find somebody else.
Yeah, and on Saturday, I was working there, and I got to work behind a bar. Now, I've worked in cafes, I've worked as a waitress before, I've never worked as a bar person actually pouring drinks.
Right, okay.
And so just doing that was quite cool, you know, pulling the pints and, you know, like gin and tonic or vodka cranberry. And it's like new experience. And I think that there's some joy to be had in work the first time you have a new job, if you know what I mean. because even if it's not the most exciting thing, it's like, yeah, actually, this is really cool. I'm getting to learn so much,
Okay.
and I'm getting a peek behind what goes on in this.
I've never done that kind of job before. I've never worked behind a bar or anything like that. So
And so I think that was my cool thing, getting to see what it's like there, and yeah, giving me a new perspective. And you know what? If I'm being honest, I don't think any place would be up for this, but I would be totally up for basically working a day, if I had a day off from everything else, just at pretty much any random job.
right. So on a related note, considering what I've just been saying, how do you fancy doing a day's gardening?
Well, it's a bit far to travel.
It is a little far. It'd take you what, 3
I mean,
hours to
if
get
you
here?
could cover my travel costs and travel time, then sure, let's look into it.
Come round. You can do a day's gardening while I'm inside writing a rule book. Yeah, like that's gonna happen.
Normally we do a quick, what have we been up to last week? What have we been up to last week? What have we been up to last week? Any highlights? You were talking about Cloudspire.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that, and this is touching on what I said earlier on about me taking a little bit of a step back away from the paid work in November and December. The reason for that is I'm doing multiple live streams. So as part of my Patreon campaign, plug for the Patreon campaign, I'm doing 7 live streams this week, none of which are commissioned. So yeah, 7 live streams, none of which have been paid for in any way, shape or form by the publisher. So it's taking a lot of my time basically to say thank you to my Patreon supporters and to obviously try and boost the campaign at the end of the year.
And I guess something like Cloudspire versus Kanban or whatever, because you've not been intimately involved with it, you have to kind of really work for a day or so to gain that familiarity.
Well, you say that, because it's not a commissioned video. So this is the thing, my commissioned videos, if you watch one of my commissioned videos, it's hopefully spot on, perfect. I've planned it, I've prepared it, I've scripted it, you know, all of that. Cloudspire on Monday was me and Ben remembering how to play and playing through it. We made errors.
Okay.
Right? We were learning it. The video was, me and Ben are going to learn how to play this game. We'd already played it once before, but Cloudspire is the kind of game with lots of nuances and lots of exceptions to the rules. So we were doing it live, so we had people in the chat pointing out a couple of things we've done wrong. And since the video went live, there's a Cloudspire player who's really good with the rules, Mark Buxton, and he's been through the entire 4-hour video and he's commented on all the things we got wrong to help us learn so we won't make those mistakes next time, which is brilliant. So, you know, you say I've got to do all of that prep. I actually didn't for that game.
And it sounds like that's part of, you know, what you're telling people it is, kind of like a Rado runs through almost.
Yeah, effectively. And, you know, the one that I'm doing this afternoon is the Lord of the Rings Journeys in the Dark playthrough. Again, it's not sponsored. So
it's a playthrough. It's not
a playthrough.
How to play.
No. It's just me doing a solo playthrough of the game. And whilst I will refresh myself of the rules, I might make mistakes. I'm not doing any sponsored playthroughs this week. So, as I say, the sponsored ones, I go to extra effort. I play the game a couple of times first. I come up with a scripted method of, not word for word scripted, but I work out how I'm going to do the teach and everything else. So it's good in a way. I mean, I like those videos. I don't like the fact that I'm making rules mistakes on the videos with the reputation that I have for rules. But when you're doing a live playthrough for a game that you don't know that well, and one of the live playthroughs we're doing on Friday, in fact, 2 of them that we're doing on Friday, are for games that none of us have played. We're doing Frontier Wars and we're doing Era of the Medieval Kingdom. None of us have played those games. And we're gonna all read through the rulebook beforehand, but then we're going to play them live. The publishers know this. They know that the video is being done. The other thing as well is that if my non-sponsored videos were really good and absolutely spot on perfect, why would any publisher want to pay for a sponsored one?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
It's like, look, if you want to sponsor the video, you can. That's going to cost you X amount of money. But for that, you're going to get me properly learning the rules, properly reading all of the FAQ, playing it myself, then playing it with friends off camera to learn how to play, then planning how I'm going to deliver the teach, and then you'll get a proper video. But that's going to take me, you know, a day's work to prep that. If you're not going to sponsor the video, I'm still going to do a video for you, but it's going to be fairly rough and ready and it might contain some rules mistakes. It's just how it is. Anyway, we drifted off topic. You were talking about something cool that I've done this week, and I was going to talk about Cloudspire, and then we ended up talking about my videos. So anyway,
And-
Cloud Spire was really good. And it was 4 hours.
Okay.
And I loved it.
Brilliant. Have you... But yeah, let's talk about videos at the end of the show, because potentially I might be interested in asking you, like, not for yogi, but for something marginally more. But let's quickly talk about the butter of the week. So I have Lurpak. I didn't buy it, I don't think, but there is Lurpak in my fridge.
Well, how
and
did
if I
it
were
get
to
there,
ever
then?
use butter, I would use that Lurpak. What
Okay.
about you, Paul?
So you've got Lurpak in your fridge, but you didn't buy it.
Yes.
Right.
There are 4 people who live in this house.
Right. Somebody bought Lurpak.
Yes. It's not mouldy. It's fine to use.
Right. Now I'm just on the internet right now, and I'm having a look to see if Lurpak is butter. And it is.
Yes.
It's a Danish brand of butter, because butter's one of those things where people go, you know, do you want butter on it? But actually there's margarine, which isn't butter, but some people think it's butter. And then there's that stuff which isn't butter, but you can't believe that it isn't butter. And then there's also
olive oil spread.
there's olive oil spread. I think what I have in my fridge, is the olive oil spread. Now, we do have butter in the house because Vicky bakes a lot. So we do have actual butter, which she uses for baking.
So the question is, since Vicky is the baker, I feel like Vicky should really be on this podcast for 10 seconds telling us what the butter is.
If she was here, she wouldn't agree to that. Vicky's extremely shy. The reason why you've never seen or heard from her in any of my videos is she's extremely shy. So even if she
Okay.
was here, she wouldn't say anything.
Well, I will say this. My mum bakes. My mum used to make cakes. Like, my mum was actually genuinely commissioned to make wedding cakes at one
Oh,
point.
wow. Nice.
And I think my mum used to buy Lurpak,
Right.
because they have the salted and they have the unsalted.
Yeah.
And it's apparently good quality. So I think we should just go ahead. And you know what? Butter's not for everyone, but as far as our limited knowledge goes, Lurpak is the butter of the week.
There we go. Lurpak is the butter of the week.
Okay, so now to the main topic, finally. We're going to talk about why start a board game convention. So I started something similar, BG DevCon with Andy Angu,
Yeah.
because I was wanting board game designers to get together and talk about board game design. And it was about networking, it was about improving knowledge. And frankly, it was because I wanted to go to such a thing, and no one else had made such a thing, if you know what I mean.
So do it.
Frankly, if someone else said, you know what, I want to do this, I want to run this at my office, like Alicat Games was starting something and then said, oh, we don't want to be on the toes of Bez's thing, but it was inspired by this, which is nice, so they made it slightly different. But if someone wanted to take it over, I'd be like, yeah, go for it, you
Right.
do all the work, that's brilliant, you do it. I would rather just go as an attendee and pay like the $12.50 or whatever and just attend and not have to, you know, do all the work behind it, frankly.
So you're still doing all of the work behind it.
Yeah, myself and Andy. So we kind of have to work out a date at Andy's place, that Andy can do it, because if we had to book a hotel or something in London, that would just be too expensive.
Yeah.
We go off and we get to a big buffet thing from Costco and stuff, and then recently we've done the division of labour. Andy does the food and I do the kind of running the talks and the scheduling.
How often does it run?
Once a year.
Right, okay. I thought you ran it more often than that.
No, it's only once a year, that's it.
Wow, okay.
It's run, once every year for the past, I think this is the 4th one now. So I guess it must have been 16, 17, 18, 19, that would be it.
Right, okay.
But that was why I did it. Now, why did you do GridCon?
Well, just going back on that, it's very clever what you did there, is that you came up with the idea of running this event, but you're holding it at Andy's house. That's fantastic.
Well, it's not their house.
Oh, right, okay. Where is it?
So Andy has basically owned the Adult Learning Academy.
Ah, okay, right.
And so this is a building in London, well, North London, which has, big room with a projector, a couple of smaller rooms, and it is a business place.
Right, okay.
But we basically need to have it when the Adult Learning Academy is technically closed, which makes it August, or Easter weekend, which we did once, which was terrible, because a lot of people like to do other things that Easter weekend.
Yep.
And so that is why it's got to basically be in August.
Right,
Because
I see.
it is at a place of work.
Makes sense. Right. Anyway, back to your question.
So, GridCon, when
Yes.
did you start that?
Well, we touched on this briefly earlier on, is because GridCon or pre-GridCon was basically being run at my house. Obviously I have a limit on how many people can be here. At one point, about 5 or 6 years ago, I think we had 35 people here.
Wow.
About 20 of them were staying over, which means the house was just, I mean, we had tents in the garden, we had people sleeping in the garage. It was crazy. There's something nice about hosting an event at your house. There's something nice about waking up on a Sunday morning, going downstairs and finding the game of Twilight Imperium still going on from the night before. Because I like hosting, I like the fact that friends can come around to my house, they don't have to pay for accommodation, and they can play games for 3 days solid or 4 games solid. However, as I've got older, my tolerance for people leaving rubbish lying around in the middle of the floor has dropped. But the one thing that did it is, of course, the more and more I've worked in the industry, the more and more people I've got to know. The more and more people I therefore want to invite to these events. And it was sometime in 2018 where I was going through the list of everybody who I'd like to invite, because these events were twice a year, once in July around my birthday and once 4 or 5 weeks after Essen. And I've been doing that for, well, I've been doing the
Was
post.
that to play all the new stuff?
Yeah, so the traditional one, which started in the year 2000, was Paul's post-Essen Games Weekend. So I've been running that for 20 years. And it's always been a month after Essen, everybody comes around Paul's house and plays all of these new hot titles. That's been running for 20 years. Then in 2010, for my 40th, and I know I don't look 49, but I am. For my 40th, I said to Vicky, I said, I'm going to do another one of these, another 4-day event around my birthday. And she said, this is just going to be a one-off, isn't it? And I said, yeah, it's just a one-off event every year in July. So from 2010 onwards, the once-a-year event became twice a year. The November one, I had rules that you were only allowed to play games that have been released in the last 3 months. Whereas the summer one was anything goes. Anyway, I was looking down this list of all of these people who I would like to be there, and I was suddenly having to make decisions of which 30 people I invited. And that was really hard to do.
Yeah.
And a couple of people have actually said to me over the last year or so, you should turn this into an event. You know, actually hire a place, and then you can invite loads of people. And I was like, no. I like it, the fact that it's my house, I invite people round, it's absolute chaos for 3 days. But it was unfair on Vicky, it's her house as well. It was unfair on the cats. The disturbance
has GridCon replaced your personal house things?
Yes. Yeah, the twice a year event that I now have here, where 30 people come over and live here for 4 days, they've now gone. I now will have a games day, where people will come round for the day. But the 2 big events that were a yearly thing, a biannual thing, they are now, that is what's become GridCon. So that was the main reason for doing it.
And you decided to go to Devon. Is that close to you?
I live in Devon.
Oh shit, I never realised.
Where did you think I was? I mean, I have a northern accent, so you might have thought I was still up north.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, I'm in Devon.
I thought Devon was a nice place.
Well, it is. No, I've been in Devon for 10 years. I was in Somerset for 2 years. So I used to live in Hertfordshire, originally Lancashire for 27 years, moved to Coventry for a year, Hertfordshire for 10 years, Somerset for 2 years, and I've been down here now for 10 years. So I've been 10 years in Devon. It's what the D is in GridCon. So GridCon is gaming rules in Devon. And it's in Devon because I live in Devon.
It's very good branding. I was aware that it was in Devon.
Well, we've got to keep it in Devon now.
I was not aware that you lived in Devon.
No, I do. Yeah, so I actually live about 15 minutes drive away from where the venue is, which is very handy when you get there and realise you've forgotten something. You just you just drive back and get the shelves. Yeah, and this is one of the things people have said, because GridCon 1 was a success and we could have had more people, is venues. And sure, I could go into Somerset and look for venues, but then it would be GrisCon, and that doesn't work. So it's got to stay in Devon, because of the
So
D
you're
in
still
GridCon.
probably going to have a limit, and so you're probably
Yeah.
going to be selling out.
Oh yeah, GridCon 2 and GridCon 3 have already been booked. The venue is booked for GridCon 2 and 3, and we've already paid for GridCon 2. Tickets have gone on sale, and we're 60% sold out already. And I haven't really advertised it yet. So
isn't that... I guess the difference there is that it's not you having to make those difficult decisions of who do I invite.
no, now it's up to you. If you want to come, here's the tickets. Book soon to avoid disappointment. So all of those bad feelings I had about who to invite and who not to invite, they disappeared.
It sounds like ultimately the reason why you started GridCon was to put off the decision of who to invite.
That's one of the reasons. It's because to be honest, if I only knew 25 people and I only wanted 25 people to come round, I would probably just have kept them at my house. I wouldn't have had... It was those bad feelings that I had. Bad feelings cause me to change things. Bad feelings are a driver for me to go, how can I resolve this situation? Now, I'm lucky in the way that, for example, the event that I ran in the summer, Ting, this is not GridCon. People came to that event. Some people came to that event, weren't really sure what to do, didn't feel comfortable in going up to strangers and asking in to join their games, and therefore spent most of their time with themselves and played games against themselves. And that's fine. If they want to do that, that's absolutely fine. But I had bad feelings. I had bad feelings on their behalf. I was like, you've paid money, you've gone to a convention, you and your partner, and you've ended up sitting there at a table playing games, just you and your partner. You may as well have stayed at home.
So how did you counteract that?
I counteracted that by advertising a service at GridCon 1 called Paul's Demo Gaming Table for New People, which I need a better name for. But essentially, if you were at GridCon 1 and you were in that exact situation and you turned up, you didn't really know anybody else, you didn't know what was happening and you didn't feel comfortable joining in a game, you come and see Paul, and for the first 4 hours of each day, I basically gave up my time to collect all of these people together. We would then find a game that they wanted to play. I'd teach them how to play the game together, and suddenly people have got to know each other. And that was the idea. And when I advertised this, people came back to me and went, wow, that's a really good idea. You're giving up your own time. That's really selfless of you. It's a really good thing and everything else. And I'm thinking, I've done this to avoid me having bad feelings on your behalf. But the benefit is, people made use of it and it was really good.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
it does sound brilliant. And yeah, there's so many different things that can be done. I mean, let's not go into what makes a good convention. I mean, I think that we've explored sufficiently why we started the events that we started.
Yeah.
And obviously, Tabletop Gaming Live, I don't think it's for us to look into the bureaucratic system or, managerial system of the Warner Brothers Media Group. But I think that making a convention to say, hey, there's a whole bunch of people wanting to be here. If we can get enough people here and if we can get enough exhibitors here, then we can make money. I think that if I'm actually very much in favor of that, because I feel like if there is space for that to happen, then it shows how much the hobby has grown.
Yeah.
And it would really help expand the hobby, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, people comment that the location was terrible. Alexandra Palace is a terrible location. Speaking to somebody who travelled from Devon, I thought it was a good location, but I might be wrong on here. It's because it's not on a tube line, you have to walk for 10 minutes. I'm like, sure, you've got to walk for 10 minutes.
Is fine.
Exactly.
I mean, Londoners are just bloody lazy.
Is that what it is? I thought the location was fine. I mean, it's an amazing venue.
Yeah, it's the prettiest venue. The only comparable thing is the bits of stained glass in Essen. Every other convention, for the most part, is either in a warehouse or in a hotel, which pretty much looks like much of a muchness.
Yeah.
But, with the Alexandra Palace, you've got the big stained glass, you've got the pipe organ, you've got plants dotted around. It looks good.
Yeah, and it's within the M25. I think there's a lot of people who I certainly spoke to who were at Tabletop Gaming Live who were on the outskirts of the hobby. But they went along because they saw a games convention in London and they went along to it. They wouldn't have gone along to something like Dragon Meet, and they wouldn't have gone to UK Games Expo. So I think in some ways, Tabletop Gaming Live, it's a pity that it wasn't more successful, and I'm hoping that they do carry on, and I'm hoping they do grow.
I would really like it to be... I mean, the one thing I've heard that is fair, but again, this is a kind of price difficulty for them, is to keep it open for longer. Because shutting down at, what was it, 5, 6?
6.
And then chucking everyone out.
Yeah.
And then, yes, Cakes and Ladders was opening their doors for people, and I'm sure they benefited, but they didn't have the capacity for people who just want to carry on playing games until maybe 9 or 11, frankly.
Yeah, then again, Essen does the same. Essen closes at 7 and you just close the doors.
Essen closes at 7, which is 1 hour later, but then traders are allowed to stay there.
They are now.
And
yeah, but you have to buy an expensive ticket. It's a very expensive ticket.
No, but there is a whole thing where some people actually, I think like Pegasus Spiel does the thing where you pay a bit extra and then you get to stay all night.
It's quite a bit extra.
Well, I don't know how much it is because I've just got the exhibitor tickets always, so I've never looked at it.
It's quite expensive. But yeah, so yeah, we'll see. But you're absolutely right. The reason why they decided to host a convention, I think, was for financial reasons, and that's fine. If that's why they want to do it, I've no problem with that, because it's us that's going to benefit. It's me and you that's going to benefit if it ends up being successful.
Absolutely.
We'll pay our bit to have a table.
There's lots of talk about how the toy and the game industry are kind of moving in together.
Yeah.
Because the game industry is starting to get prettier things like good table presents.
Oh yeah.
And the toy industry is starting to have stuff that's actually a legitimate game that you might be playing in 2 years' time rather than scrapping after a week.
It's funny, isn't it? Because 20 years ago there was me staring at a board full of wooden little cubes and getting excited, and now we're staring at a board with, you look at games like Tapestry or Blood Rage or something like that, and table presence is absolutely. The thing, because games, they look nice, and therefore some of them certainly are more appealing to other people. If we look at Mega City Oceania, recent game from Hub Games.
Yeah, building up those skyscrapers. Yeah. It looks attractive. It's like, what's going on? I want to do this.
Exactly. If you have that set up on a table, people are going to walk past and look at it with interest rather than a board about German politics covered in wooden cubes.
I think that we've established that's okay. Some people have started it for money. Some people have started it because something doesn't exist, like I did.
Yeah.
Some people have started it because it outgrew what used to be a personal thing.
Yeah.
And I know Frank West for City of Games, that was because something in Bristol didn't exist.
Yep.
And I believe that that's also why Pat, Richard, Mike and everyone started UK Games Expo, because I was like,
we didn't have it. Yeah, we didn't have a big UK games convention like Essen, Gen Con and everything else. We don't have one, and they started it. And
now it's actually comparable.
Well, it's comparable to Origins.
I mean, I'm not saying it's as big as Essen, but it's 10%
it's
of the size. That is comparable to my mind.
It's very comparable to how Origins and Gen Con work. Not so much Essen, because as we mentioned earlier on, Essen closes its doors at 7 and you disappear. And it is pretty much exhibit halls and nothing else, whereas as UK Games Expo has massive open gaming areas, it has a massive games library, it has seminars, it has role-playing games, it has almost everything for the whole cross section. It hosted a 400+ player X-Wing tournament one year. Right? It's just there's a lot of stuff that goes on at X.
My understanding is that yes, Essen now is a money-making thing for the Metzlers.
Yeah, it's a trade fair.
I heard Dominic kind of talking on a podcast. I think it might have been 5 Games for Doomsday. I can't remember. But definitely I heard them talking about how they set it up so many years ago and invited some traders, and then so many more people came than they expected, and then they kept doing it over and over again.
Yeah.
And now it just grew because back then there wasn't anything like it.
Yeah.
And it feels to me that because we need to wrap this up, but if we want to have a thing that we've learned, it would be like, people make this because they want to have something that doesn't exist.
In your case, yes. In terms of my case, I was fully aware that starting another board game convention was just like all of the other board game conventions. There was nothing that was going... Initially, there is now, and I'll get to that in a second, but I was fully aware that I was creating another Baycon, Manacon, Stabcon, Handycon, all of that. I was just doing another one. I wasn't offering anything different. I was just offering another one that fit into the same category as everything else. Now, as it turns out...
But you are the difference.
Well, there's that, but I also used my industry contacts. So this was a small 200-person board gaming convention in Devon, right? With Vital Lacerda, Richard Breeze, David Terzi, Tony Boydell, David Mortimer, Matthew Dunstan. I've probably forgotten one, right? That's some pretty big name designers at a small 200-person convention in Devon. That's what made GridCon a bit different. And I've actually had quite a few comments from people who came and went, wow, I just went along to, just a small board games convention in Devon and suddenly met all these people and got to play Tony Boydell's new game and then spent time chatting with Vital Lacerda about, and stuff like this. That's what GridCon can offer, which I have the position of, these people are generally clients of mine. So, I've invited them there. I didn't charge them for any exhibitor tables and said, look, if you want to come along, it'll be good for me, but it'll also be good for you because you can, play test your games and things like that. So that's the one thing I think that GridCon does offer. Obviously, these designers are there at UK Games Expo, but at UK Games Expo, they're running their own booth. At GridCon,
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a difference when I am as a trader at Glasgow Games Festival, for example, I'm able to talk to someone for half an hour.
Yeah.
At UK Games Expo,
no chance.
Unless you're press, I'm not going to do that.
No. So at GridCon, people sat down and had a chat with them, had food and played a game with them, and it was great. The two guys that actually picked up Vital from the airport, because Vital was flying in from Portugal, and I got a couple of friends in Bristol who effectively drive past the airport on the way to where the convention was, and they said, well, we'll pick him up on the way. And I was like, are you sure? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So I spoke to Vital and said, don't worry, I've got your lift from the airport sorted. You're going to get picked up. So what I did is I arranged for one evening for them to play a game with Vital. They were thrilled. They were like, not only did we pick him up from the airport, we got to play a game with him. So yeah, that was quite cool.
We do need to wrap up. And if people want to find you on the internet?
Yes, Gaming Rules. So the YouTube channel is Gaming Rules Videos. The Twitter channel is Gaming Rules Vids, because videos was too long for Twitter. And Facebook is Gaming Rules as well. Gaming Rules everything.
I'm Stuff by Bez, at Stuff by Bez if you want to search for me. And I think we've talked about so much. We've talked about, not overworking yourself. We've talked about making a convention for different reasons. We talked about how, different reasons are okay for different situations. We talked about butter. We talked about... the
Bradninch Craft Fair.
Yeah. And we talked about working behind a bar, and we talked about conventions a bit more.
We did, yeah.
And it was a good chat. It was lovely to have you on. But for now, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to Paul Grogan for speaking to me, Richard Simpson for getting this to you, and of course Ian Bolton, who back in the day was running this internet radio show and sorting out a lot of the technical uploading stuff so that I didn't have to. Now, I no longer do an internet radio audio show, but if you would like to hear from me, you can hear me every day live at 10 AM UK time on twitch.tv/stuffbybez. You can also find me on facebook.com/thingsbybez, twitter.com/stuffbybez, YouTube, I don't have a vanity URL yet, stuffbybez.com, or you can email me on stuffbybez@gmail.com. And I hope you've enjoyed this show. Thank you for listening, and again, bye-bye.